When Kurapika's learning how to use Nen, and we find out that you can't make an invincible magic sword, but his teacher also says that any realistic conjured sword will be weaker than the real thing, you might get the impression that conjuration creates objects weaker than their real-life counterparts. But this isn't true. What that scene is getting at is that conjuration doesn't fundamentally materialize objects. So when you approach it from the mindset of spending aura to temporarily create a sword, the effect that resembles creating a sword is going to be less reliable than an actual sword. When you design Hatsu from this angle, like Kurapika stubbornly does, it's a way to simplify the general limits you'll run into without having to go over how the category would work. If we're being honest, Conjuration is the best Nen category, and you can conjure anything under the right conditions. So let's go over how to make the most of it. Conjuration spends aura to give an effect momentum. In ancient times, yin and yang could be prescribed to anything to break down how it would exist as a concept. Yin would be the endings, the potential for a new concept to take shape, and yang would be the substance within it. If yin would dwell within the first and last days of your life, yang would be tied to the moment you're in your prime and relatively stronger than babies or the elderly, even though it doesn't define much of anything directly. Yang would also be a momentum. And every moment of your life would fit within this nice little harmony where a moment of yin creates a moment of yang, which causes your deterioration because it's defined as your peak, so it eventually creates another moment of yin. And then the idea that you're alive is replaced with a different idea, or you reincarnate, and either way the cycle repeats. But the pieces of a cycle could also exist simultaneously. The average students of a class take that class at the same time as the best and the worst. Just by going to school, they've manifested this harmony of people who all preserve the class average from different positions. And you're not just stuck with two categories. There could be roles for some harmony anywhere around that ring. Think about seasonal plants, or just the seasons themselves. Yin would be winter, and yang would be summer, but that leaves spring as a transitional role where yang is emerging from within yin, and fall as another transitional role where yin is emerging from within yang. That would be a cycle of 4 phases. Plants or elements would be 5, because there are also year-round plants that don't depend on the season. And Naruto has Earth, which is sort of a representative element of a cycle itself, with the personality trait of consistency. Conceptually though, the most comprehensive number of phases to divide a cycle into would be 6. This way, you account for the transitional periods in between yin and yang, and the differences between them. After all, spring is different from fall, but you also pay attention to which force is dominant. I would not go so far as 8, because the 2 extreme phases of full yin and full yang are the bounds of the cycle, so keeping it 6 centers any transitions around them. And this way lets you tell whether a transition is more related to the end it's moving from or the end it's arriving at. It's important because it's the difference between whether something that can ultimately be categorized as part of a cycle between yin and yang is more yang revolving around a little yin, or yin building itself within a shell of yang. Another idea from ancient times, discovered in a completely different part of the world, is the concept of simple machines. Let's say you have the strength and stamina to lift about 5 pounds until that object is over your head. And unfortunately, your boss wants you to do that for a boulder. If you put that strength into lifting a 5,000-pound rock, then even with stamina aside, it won't budge in the first place. But if you could use an intermediary that transforms and redirects how you apply force, so that instead of lifting a 5,000-pound rock the height you need, you just apply your stamina to lift it 1,000th of the distance, then you can put another intermediary, like a floor tile, underneath the boulder and preserve your progress so you can lift it another 1,000th of the distance tomorrow. While this is still tedious, you've turned a routine that would get 0 progress done no matter how much time you zoom out into something that would get the job done eventually. You've given yourself a new ability to affect things and change the state of the world on your own terms by using basic intermediaries from the world around you that transform how your muscles can apply force to cause physical effects. This is the idea of the simple machine. They're structures made from physical materials that act as building blocks for circuits of redirections of force for different functionality. Or to put that in a way that isn't nonsense and won't keep the channel from hitting 30K, simple machines are the basic pieces, like elements, of actual machines. Each of them redirects force in some different way, so they're used in combination to create one large doohickey that does whatever the user who supplies it physical force would want. They're similar to the types of logic gates in a computer that are combined to make a computer, only there are 3 types of logic gates. In the modern day, people have come to believe that there are specifically 6 simple machines: the wedge, the lever, the ramp, the screw, the pulley, and the wheel on the axle. And they just so happen to line up perfectly with the 6 phases of a yin and yang cycle. The wedge, like the head of an axe, concentrates the force of whoever swings it into a sharp end, increasing the destructive power of the user. This would line up the most with the empowerment of yang. And in the belief where humans have life energy that materializes in them through a cycle where they concentrate it from nature and then release it back out through physical activity, the yang part of that cycle is the concentrating of life energy to use for physical actions, which seems to be the mechanism behind what enhancement Hatsu actually does. And we'll get to what the yin part of that cycle, the spreading of life energy through an action to set up future actions, would explain about Hunter x Hunter in the next video. The phase after yang would be yang revolving around the emergence of yin. Empowerment through this would be finding strength in changing what limits already exist through new concepts and new potential. The fitting simple machine would be the lever, because this one changes the balance of force concentration to flexibly cut corners when you can afford to, and pace your actions when you can't, like with the boulder. This phase affinity would be why Killua has the patience for assassination, balances his emotions and actions, and has the potential to grow into his own person even after his starting mindset and skills have been set in place by his brother's manipulation. This brings us to the ramp, which makes it easier to reach higher places, because you go in a straight line, which reduces the amount of travel required, but also because it makes it possible to reach places you can't on your own. Since it turns cliffs into roads with walkable angles you can smoothly travel across to get to. Consider this yin building itself within a shell of yang. New potential is clustering and building together, so it can overpower the momentum of the status quo, and empowerment through this would mean having the ability to build that new momentum to overpower your regular limits. In Hunter x Hunter, when you optimize life energy, you can insulate yourself from the chain reactions of things around you. This gives you the freedom to build up an excess of life energy and structure your own logical circuit in your head to spend your excess life energy in order to cause some physical effect of your choice. So it seems like the power system combines the idea of a yin-yang cycle with the concept of the simple machines to come up with the idea of Hatsu and its 6 categories. The limitations of all 6 Nen categories make much more intuitive sense if you imagine they're all intricate applications of 6 types of force redirection. Enhancement would concentrate your energy into the behavior of something that already exists to make it more effective. Transmutation would subvert the details of a circuit that already exists by intricately changing it to expand its potential by freeing up what it can be used for. Conjuration would be like Nagi from Blue Lock, who traps the ball, which means to reset its movement in soccer so you can make a second kick more easily to send the ball wherever you want. You're spending some of your aura to cluster together and manifest an artificial circuit within the physical world so you can spend the rest of your energy on custom functionality. It's a setup stage, or relay, that frees up what the rest of your stamina can be spent on, so long as it's able to hold itself together, which is why people who specifically manifest something that resembles a physical object tend to mash all sorts of visuals together into one single tool. And that's also why trying to replicate the details of a realistic object would be counterintuitive. While a person might need to visualize a realistic object to manually trigger conjuration, the functionality of your ability should not depend on the realistic properties of that object, since it's a medium for you to apply the rest of your stamina through. The details are struggling to hold themselves together, and the more you require those realistic details for your ability to work, the more you're going to use up your mental cache structuring the data for them. Only store them in your actual memory, so their imagery can be triggers for your train of thought to activate your power and hold it together, which is why you can't make an invincible magic sword either, that's able to ignore and override the rest of reality without any resistance. In theory, you don't even need to conjure something physical. That circuit only has to be stable enough for logical functionality, so you could be providing the artificial force for a rule that scales in effectiveness based on proximity to your location. Think of Knuckles' APR, that does have a physical form, but makes it so any attacks you deal are converted into their aura amounts and given to the user. You're making more of a ramp the more energy you spend in conjuration to make some conceptual effect that won't naturally occur in reality more and more downhill to achieve. So you can make some effect override the normal rules of reality around you if you pour enough energy into the conjuration alone. Given that Basho's ability seems to work this way, his poems are probably limited to physical developments in the areas where he writes them, and resisted by the amounts of aura their subjects would have. Writing good poems would be a way to improve the makeshift complexity of what the effect would do, but at the end of the day, it'd be more effective with physical effects in specific positions, like causing a chair to fly or setting someone on fire, than seeming to manipulate fate itself by guaranteeing a jackpot on a slot machine. Like with any Nen category, you have an affinity for the building block and the conceptual application, not the way those building blocks are implemented. If a conjurer wants, they can make an ability that uses conjurations that store details and make it easier for them to improvise what else they conjure, although the effectiveness of that would be based on how their ability algorithm triggers conjuration and how they can organize all the details they'd need to reference. Rihan goes through a ritual in order to make something custom, and Kortopi can only copy things, but Heinrich doesn't really have to care. He can just say he has a dream and then turn a soda can into an animal. Speaking of turning into an animal, you should really check out what we look into over on the Patreon. I've been requested to learn how to design a fursona this month, and it has been taking me forever. I don't know what to pick, and I've brainstormed 20 different designs at this point, while talking about stuff like Avatar and Team Fortress 2. So go check that out over there. But to wrap things up, if you want me to go over certain Hatsu designs, or try designing example ones myself, let me know in the comments. That is all for this optimization. See ya.